President Trump signed a number of executive orders in his first hours in office, many of them dealing directly with the border crisis and illegal immigration. They include realigning the refugee program, declaring a national emergency at the border, and ending so-called birthright citizenship. Deportations of criminal illegal aliens have already begun. But these actions have not been without controversy, garnering a reaction from the U.S. Catholic bishops and several Catholic NGOs. Is the Trump administration acting within its rights in order to protect the U.S. homeland, or are these actions immoral? For answers, we're joined by a member of the USCCB's Committee on Migration and Refugee Services, Archbishop of Miami, Thomas Wenski. Your Excellency, thank you for being here. Welcome back to the program. The tension between the U.S. bishops and the Trump administration really spiked after Vice President JD Vance, a Catholic, was critical of the U.S. bishops on CBS's Face the Nation. Watch.
The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops this week condemned some of the executive orders signed by President Trump, specifically those allowing immigration and customs enforcement to enter churches and to enter schools. Do you personally support the idea of conducting a raid or enforcement action in a church service, at a school?
As a practicing Catholic, I was actually heartbroken by that statement. And I think that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops needs to actually look in the mirror a little bit and recognize that when they receive over $100 million to help resettle illegal immigrants, are they worried about humanitarian concerns, or are they actually worried about their bottom line? We are going to enforce immigration law. We're going to protect the American people.
Archbishop Wenski, Cardinal Dolan called those comments by the Vice President nasty and scurrilous. But isn't this a prudential judgment entrusted to duly elected authorities in this case?
Well, certainly they do have the prudential judgment to enforce, and it's their obligation to enforce the laws of the land. How they do it, or the spirit in which they do it, should be one that promotes the common good and does not necessarily create more harm than good in the process of implementing the laws. So, and I think the Vice President was a bit off the mark when alleging that we've gotten $100 million to resettle illegal aliens. First of all, we've gotten we participated since the end of World War II with the U.S. government in helping to resettle refugees, and refugees by definition are not illegal aliens. They're people that have been admitted to this country by the United States under the Refugee Act, and the U.S. government has contracted with the Catholics and also with Jewish organizations and other Protestant organizations to help resettle these people, because the government knows that when nonprofits, when faith-based organizations do this work, they do it much more efficiently and much more economically than the government. And again, it's not government money that we're receiving. It's our money, because the government doesn't have any money. It's taxpayer money, and we're taxpayers as Catholics in this country.
Earlier this week, the conference issued a statement very quickly addressing this long-standing partnership that you referenced with the federal government, and they make the case that though they receive a large portion of the USCCB migration program money from the government, it doesn't cover everything. Here's a quote: "Every person resettled through USRAP is vetted and approved for the program by the federal government while outside the United States. In our agreements with the government, the USCCB receives funds to do this work. However, these funds are not sufficient to cover the entire cost of the program." Your Excellency, look, people are open to that. They're certainly hearing that. But I want to play something and get your reaction to this. This is Catholic Charities of Milwaukee, the Archdiocese of Milwaukee, coaching immigrants about what they should immigration authorities appear at their workplace or homes. Watch.
First, do not panic and do not run away. 2, you have the right to remain silent. You do not need to speak to the immigration authorities or answer any questions. 3rd, you have the right to speak to a lawyer. If you are detained or taken into custody, you have the right to immediately contact a lawyer.
Archbishop, the question this raises is why is Catholic Charities advising illegal aliens on how to evade law enforcement? That's certainly what that sounds like.
Well, I don't think it's how to invade law enforcement. The first thing they told them is not to flee, not to run away. But they also said that they have certain rights, and basically they're educating people to know their rights so that their rights are not abused. So I think the first thing they said was, don't run away, and know your rights so that you can get the proper representation that you need, so that if you have a case to make, you can make that case and not be railroaded on spurious reasons.
Mm-hmm. Your Excellency, there have been reports that Catholic NGOs were granted as much as $2.9 billion in migration-related funding over the past 4 years of the Biden administration. I mean, Catholic Charities of Houston alone reportedly received $500 million in those taxpayer funds, which goes to migrants for cars and rent and housing and food. Because so many of the dioceses have their own independent migration offices, the funds are difficult to track. My question is, can you see how the average American Catholic might be distressed at how the government and their funds are working with the church to prioritize illegal aliens over our own citizens?
Again, if the government has given this money to the various Catholic charities organizations, they're giving this money to carry out services on behalf of the government for people that the government has allowed into the country. These are not getaways that are the beneficiaries of this government money or this taxpayer money. These are people that have been paroled into the country and with the understanding that they're going to apply for asylum, et cetera. Now, you know, that the prior administration, policy perhaps encouraged people that would come across the country that did not have a bona fide case to make. That is another argument. But if the government has these people and they say, I need help, and they ask the church, can you help? We help.
Well, but Archbishop, look, I was down in Brownsville, Texas, and they have a huge Catholic Charities, a receiving center there. And these are people who just come across. I mean, I watched them at 3 a.m. I was embedded. I watched the folks being brought across by the cartels by the hundreds. They're put in buses and they're brought to Catholic Charities, who basically give them a manila folder and an airline ticket to go wherever they wanted in the United States. That seems to be facilitating, I would argue, the extension of the cartels and their actions rather than just doing refugee work. These are two separate things, and I think the funds have all been bundled together here.
In that case, your argument is not with the Catholic Charities that are trying to fulfill the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. Your argument is with the government and their failed policies, if you will, on the border. But once these people are here, you know, you're going to leave them on the street corner to starve to death. That would be not according to what we hold as our commitment to serve those who we should recognize Jesus in their face.
Archbishop, the Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches, and I'm going to quote this, the more prosperous nations are obliged to the extent they are able to welcome the foreigner in search of the security and means of livelihood. Political authorities, for the sake of the common good for which they are responsible, may make the exercise of the right to immigrate subject to various juridical conditions, especially with regards to the immigrant's duties toward their country of adoption. And, you know, when you read that, doesn't the government have a right to regulate immigration, particularly when it comes to individuals who are known to be criminal dangers, Your Excellency, who are violating not only the immigration law, but have a criminal record?
Of course, and we have no argument with that at all. And, you know, that from the Catechism of the Church has a long history. Pius XII said in Ex Familias that, you know, people have a right, because they're human beings, they have a right to conditions worthy of human life. Everybody has a right to live in conditions of human life. But if a person cannot secure those conditions in the place where he is, in the country where he happens to be, where he was born, then he has the right to seek those conditions elsewhere. And the United States has been a welcoming country with the spirit of what is written in the Catechism over the centuries. We are a nation of immigrants. We have and welcomed millions of immigrants.
Archbishop, nobody's questioning that. We accept more immigrants than any other nation in the world, which is why it is a bit befuddling when you read, comments from the bishops' conference. And I've gotten so many emails from Catholics this week saying, why are the bishops crying out for the human dignity of criminals? I mean, the Trump administration is deporting criminal aliens. Why is that such a bad thing?
And I don't think there's an argument about that right now. And we're just making sure that we do it with the proper dignity and within the color of law as well. And there's no argument about that. You mentioned earlier something about birthright citizenship and talking about how the United States has welcomed so many immigrants. One of the best things that we have in this country is birthright citizenship, because that is the one thing that helps to integrate people into this country very quickly, because we all have great stories about that first generation American that has made it because of the sacrifices of his parents that came to this country looking for greater opportunities for them. We want people, if they're in this country, to become Americans as quickly as possible and to become participants of this great nation.
Yeah, but there needs to be an orderly process, Archbishop, and I think that's what the attempt now is, to create an orderly process. You can't just have everybody running. All the people you mentioned came in, they got, like my father, he waited 8 years, he needed a sponsor, and then he served in the military. So he became an American through desire and then proved himself. But the nation doesn't have an obligation to throw open its doors to everybody and then welcome whatever children you have. The 14th Amendment, I mean, just for clarification, and correct me if I'm wrong, 14th Amendment was created because of the free slaves, and so that they could feel fully part of the American process and experience. That's what it was created for.
It took a long time before that happened, that the 14th Amendment, was honored in reality in this country. Mm-hmm. But the 14th Amendment talks about people that are, that if they're under the jurisdiction of the United States, they have birthright citizenship.
Archbishop, Pope Francis spoke out on this issue of Trump's mass deportations on January 19th, a day before he was sworn in. He was asked by a reporter what the Pope thought of the policy. He said this: if true, this will be a disgrace because it makes the poor wretches who have nothing pay the bill for the imbalance. This won't do. This is not the way to solve things. This is not how things are resolved.
I think the qualification on that is important. If true, he says. Now, this past weekend we had a big to-do, a lot of drama about the deportation of some Colombians back to Colombia, with the president of Colombia saying, no, they can't come, and then he backtracked and said they could. There was 2 planes of about 80 Colombians in each plane that were deported back to Colombia, and they are back in Colombia today. Do you know how many Colombians were deported in December by the Biden administration? 300.
Well, I mean, but is that a bad thing?
No, it's not a bad thing. I'm just saying that, maybe this mass deportation that's everybody's feared about is not as massive as people are thinking. Cardinal
McElroy of the Washington Archdiocese said, quote, wider indiscriminate massive deportation across the country would be something that would be incompatible with Catholic doctrine. And I guess the big question is, we're talking about criminal aliens being removed from the country. Is that in any way incompatible with Catholic doctrine, Your Excellency?
Well, and I don't think Cardinal McElroy was speaking about criminal aliens. He was talking about a wider sense of deportation. And again, President Trump has, promised to get control of the border, and I think he's going to be successful in doing that. And I think policy-wise, that's a good thing, to get control of the border. But he also has promised us the greatest economy ever, that we're going to have the most prosperous economy we ever had. And that's a great promise. But if he's going to be able to keep that promise, he's going to have to make an accommodation on migration, because you're not going to have the best economy ever without immigrants, because immigrants are part of this economy. They're needed for the economy, and therefore get rid of the bad guys, the bad actors. Okay, if you have to get rid of them, get rid of them. Hopefully, we're not going to destabilize other countries because we've gotten rid of them. But after we got rid of those bad guys or taken care of them, then let's look at some way of honoring the people that have been here for years and have worked hard and have not gotten into trouble, that have paid taxes, etc.
Your Excellency, with all due respect, it seems we're asking the American taxpayer and the American administration to do what the Holy See won't do. The Holy See just promulgated laws that if you violate their border, if you cross the border illegally of the Vatican, the Holy See state, you are subject to 4 to 5 year jail sentences. So why can't we apply that to the United States? I just don't see why the American taxpayer is always the one who has to sort of bear the burden for citizens that refuse to get in line and follow an orderly process of immigration as set forth by the country itself.
Well, again, a lot of people are fleeing, desperate conditions. Look at Nicaragua, where there's an active persecution of the church, 4 bishops exiled, a diocese that has lost almost all their priests through exile by the government that not only throws them out of the country, but revokes their citizenship. These people are here in this country, many of them on TPS that hasn't been renewed or is soon to be expired. To send them back to Nicaragua this time would be like sending them back into a burning building.
I agree with you, Your Excellency. That's a case of actual refugee status that should be extended to those people. But let's face it, there are a lot of economic refugees that have been accepted that shouldn't have been.
Right. Well, look at the situation in Venezuela. Venezuela has lost 20% of its population because of the dictatorship of Maduro, and it's a left-wing dictatorship, and it's that left-wing dictatorship has ruined its economy. So people are running for political reasons and partly for economic reasons as well. But they come and they can be not a problem to us, but a resource for us, an opportunity for us, as immigrants have always.
Look, I want to move on to this. President Trump signed into law the Laken-Riley Act this week, so-called for that Georgia nursing student murdered by an illegal alien last year. The law expands the reach of federal law enforcement to arrest, detain, and deport criminal aliens. This is Laken-Riley's mother.
He said he would secure our borders and that he would never forget about Laken. And he hasn't. He's a man of his word. We trust that he will fight for the American people. Most importantly, I want to thank our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, because without his sacrifices, Laken's story would have ended on that horrific day that she was taken from us.
There are countless other examples, Your Excellency, of Americans who have been killed and assaulted, even raped by criminal illegal immigrants, trafficking kids, raping women, slaying Americans. And look, I know that's not unique to illegal aliens. Americans do it too. But why add to the trouble, if you will? Your thoughts on Laken-Riley's mother testimony there?
No, I cannot fault her testimony. It's very moving, and actually, I think the perpetrator was released he should have been in jail, and he was released by if it wasn't the immigration authorities, it was a local jail that let him go. So, not every immigrant that comes across the border is a white dove, but not everyone is a criminal or a gangster or somebody intent on doing harm. Many people that come here just seeking the possibility of life, they're seeking the conditions worthy of human life that as human beings they have a right to. It's their God-given right to live in conditions worthy of human life.
Your Excellency, isn't the government's first responsibility to American citizens and their safety under the law to make sure that these criminal offenders aren't coming into the United States, and frankly, that no one is breaking the law, including immigrants?
Nobody should break the law. Everybody should honor the law. But again, you have to remember the case of that Bishop Muriel in that novel of Victor Hugo, Les Miserables, where the protagonist was pursued by an inspector because he stole a loaf of bread, and the bishop was able to look over that failure and give him a chance at life, and that as Jesus said, the man was made, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Laws are meant to enhance human flourishing, not to harm human flourishing. A lot of these illegal aliens or illegal migrants or whatever you want to call them, it's not so much that they're breaking the law as the law is breaking them, because there is no system or no procedure for them to regulate their status. We have a broken asylum system where it takes an inordinate amount of time to process an asylum case.
Well, no, I think you're right, Archbishop. This is why we need an orderly process, though, which we don't have now because the borders were thrown open for so long.
Well, let's work on creating those orderly processes. And what I was talking about earlier, the updating of the registry date would be part of that orderly process, because it would open the doors for people that have been here for a long time, that are needed here because our economy needs them. But at the same time, if we required that they would show good moral character, so we would make sure we would not, admit any bad actors in that case, and that would be a way of providing an orderly process that would benefit not only the migrant but the rest of the American society.
Your Excellency, Archbishop Thomas Wenski, thank you for being here. Thank you for the time. We'll check in the days ahead, and we will continue to cover all sides of this immigration issue, as we have for decades, in the week ahead. Thank you.